Hey there. My name's Danny Leibrandt, and you are listening to The Local Marketeer, where we have local marketing experts every week. Today, I am with Chris Yano, who is the founder and actually now CMO of RYNO Strategic Solutions, which is one of the top digital marketing agencies for home services. He told me himself, and I've seen it, that he's working with just about all of the top home service companies. It's really impressive, and they've actually undergone a merger as well. So he's been in the space about 17 years now, maybe even more than that, but at least that's how long the agency's been around. And again, working with a lot of the top people in the space, recently went through a merger. Now he is the CMO. And mainly, I think they started out doing HVAC. Now they're kind of going into roofing, pretty much all things home services. So really impressive agency, monster scale. And also regarding his podcast, he has one of the biggest podcasts in home services as well. So one of the biggest agencies, one of the biggest podcasts, the To the Point podcast, which is also all about home services. Some other things to mention: he was a race car driver, he was a bull rider, he's good friends with Tommy Mello. He had a partnership with Gary V for 3 years, which just I knew he had him on the podcast, but that was that was ridiculous. And I'm glad that I was kind of prying a little before the podcast to ask you if there's anything else, because I figured there'd be something like that. So, Chris has just had an incredible background. He says he's kind of like the OG of the space, even though he's 45. So I think anyone who's familiar with the space is familiar with you. And just so glad to have you on the podcast, Chris.
Yeah, man, I'm excited for you to be on. I appreciate you asking me. I've been kind of doing a hiatus from doing podcasts because when you're doing them, you know how much work they are,
Yeah.
And plus running a big company, it's like time is of the essence. But I thought this year I'd kind of jump back into it, and you're the first one, man. So you got it. Let's.
That's awesome. I love that. I appreciate you coming on. So cool. Usually, how I told you I like to run it is the main thing that you've been doing is RYNO Strategic Solutions, but I want to hear, and specifically like the bull riding and the racing and all that. Like, let's get into that. What were you doing before RYNO?
Yeah, I think I'll set the tone for that. I actually get asked this question quite a bit. People just want to know like the origin of things. And so it's clear, yes, I run RYNO today, but if you'd asked me in high school and college, like if I was going to be running a company, I would have been like, how do you do that? Like not even on my radar. But it's just, it is, when I look at where I'm at today and when I was young and what are the similarities, there's some certain things that have followed me all the way through. And you mentioned a couple of things that I do: race car driving, bull riding, all like, high adrenaline, high risk. I've always kind of been that guy, a super big high risk taker. And that's kind of followed me through like my high school. I was a wrestler. I love being able to be on a team, but I like being able to like have my own outcome, like by the work I specifically put in. It's a contact sport. It's not for everybody. And then in college, I was one of those guys that went to college, and I was really good at being social. So I was like on academic probation, off academic probation, on academic. And it's because, I was just more interested in playing the social game, and I really wasn't committed to school. And, but I knew enough that I couldn't be on academic probation, 2 semesters in a row or you get booted. So I at least played the game. But yeah, when I got out, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I grew up in Indiana, farming community. My grandpa was a retired farmer and was a snowbird out here in Phoenix, Arizona, which is where I live today. And when I went there and visited one time at 16, I was like, whenever I get out of school, man, I'm going there. Like, Arizona's gorgeous. And so that's what I did. Once I left college, I went straight to Phoenix, and I've been out here ever since, with the exception of like a couple year stint of me getting back to Indiana to start the company. But yeah, man, at a time, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I kind of floundered around a little bit. When I moved to Arizona, I met a guy who was into bull riding because, lots of cowboys out this way. And I was like, cool, man, I grew up on a farm and around cows. I should be able to do this. I was a wrestler. I got good balance, and I was like not afraid to do anything. And so I was like, I jumped on and did some bull riding stuff. I was pretty decent at it. So I was like, maybe I can make a career out of this. I couldn't make a career out of it, Danny, but I got a lot of great memories from it, gotten a lot of fights from it. Was broke for a few years, but I was young. Like I was just trying to figure it out. But racing is something that we've done forever. And if Indiana is there's two things that are really important to Indiana. That's basketball and race car driving, because the Indianapolis 500
Yeah.
is the largest single day event in the world. And I always wanted to do it. My grandpa raced, my uncle raced. I got to race. So I tried to chase that one down, but it's a really expensive sport if you don't have no sponsorship money. So, but I've kind of never been afraid of hard work, and kind of digging in and trying to get, when I want something, to do something in my brain, it's like, hey, there's no way I'm going to fail because I'm going to put in the effort. Just like when I wrestled, no matter how my team finished, I could dictate my own outcome.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll see like some similarities in my journey is like, I'm really good at doing the hard work, but I'm also really good at going out and meeting, the people and being social and doing all the things, which kind of lends itself to being a good business owner and builder, because you can meet the people and also do the work, and discipline.
Yeah, I think that comes down to having a winner mentality. Like pretty much all the successful people that I've either talked to or listened to have that same trait of they need to win, they need to be the best, they need to do whatever it takes. That they can't take failure as an option. So it seems like guys like you, Tommy, all kind of have that same trait. And so just to be clear, you've had that like since the day you were born. Did that kind of come naturally?
Yeah, I think I have. I just, you just don't know. Like, I'm not thinking about, oh man, I'm a winner. It's just like, I'm not going to lose.
True.
And you can't, if you don't quit, you can't fail at the end of the day. Like, so you just keep going. And I was like, my freshman year of high school in wrestling, I took a whooping like the whole year, not because I wasn't scrappy. I was super scrappy, but there were kids who were more technically savvy than me. So I had to I could either been like, screw this, I'm quitting, or I'm like, no, I'm gonna learn, because if I'm scrappy, that's half the game. But if I just could learn the technique, then I would be good. And I came back my sophomore year and I absolutely crushed it. And from there, it was like off to the races. But I put in the work because I was like, I'm going to win. I'm not going to lose again. And they like crushed my ego my freshman year.
Yeah, definitely.
But business will do that to you too, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, okay. So really being relentless. I love that. Okay. And then tell me about starting RYNO. Or is there anything in between there?
Yeah, so actually when I figured out what I was good at, like professionally, and it wasn't bull riding or racing, like those were not going to be my careers. Once I realized that, then I learned I was good at sales. There's where the social skills kicked in. And if you're good at sales, you can make some pretty decent money depending on who you're with. And I learned that, blue collar was kind of like my people, because I grew up, from the country, and like, plumbers, electricians, air conditioning companies, roofer, like these are like my people, like, because it's how I grew up. And I was just more comfortable talking to blue collar versus white collar. And so I just happened to, my first like marketing or sales marketing job was the Yellow Pages, which you probably don't know nothing about, Danny.
I do.
I'm kidding. But it was Yellow Page, the Yellow Page phone book, but it was just starting to introduce online Yellow Pages, which is what I really gravitated towards, because, when you think about, data analysis, which is really important in our worlds today, in your world as well. When you're racing cars, data analysis is everything. You're studying the data from the car that's given back to you. Can I brake? Could I have braked later going into a turn? Could I have rolled off faster in the middle of the turn? Because you're trying to pick up speed to figure out where are you slowest and where can you be fast. In bull riding, it's the same way. You study the bull and the bull's patterns and their habits, and then you create your game plan based on that bull's patterns and habits. Right? The bull's going to come out of the gate and go right, and that you can position yourself to be ready for it to go right. So it's just studying the data. Well, that's what I liked about online advertising, is it actually gave you more information to study, to feel good that it was actually good for the customer. Because the last thing I'm going to do is go look at this plumbing company owner in the face and say, yeah, keep doing this because it's working great, but not really know. So I got really good at that. And I was early to the game. This was probably 2002, 2003, 2004 at that time. And then I got poached by another Yellow Page company called yellowpages.com at the time, which was just purchased by AT&T. And it was to help out here in the Phoenix to open this market here, and then also up into Portland and help open that market there. Again, I just focused on home services and home improvements company. I was just really good at selling them, but I could track it. But at one point in time, what I was selling wasn't happening on the back end. Meaning like I'm not going to go and sell something I don't believe in. And it wasn't that I didn't believe in the product; I just didn't believe in the execution. So I said, you know what? I told my wife, like, we can do this on our own. Like I can sell it, we can build it. Like, so we started learning, and we, pulled the trigger. And I said, listen, I'm really good at selling this stuff in these major metro markets. Imagine this is what I'm trying to sell my wife, who's born and raised here in Phoenix, to say, if we just move back to Indiana, where I'm from, like we'll be way early,
Yeah.
in the digital marketing game. And so I talked her into moving back to the Midwest for 2 winters, and we launched the company then, and it was called Brickyard Marketing back in the day. And the reason we named it Brickyard is we wanted everyone to know that we were local. And the nickname of the Indianapolis 500, is the Brickyard. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway is called the Brickyard. So that was the play. And we literally I picked up the phone and dialed, set appointments, and then I would go and run the appointments, sell them. Then I would come back and we would build the websites. We would do the search engine optimization, which I learned early on, run the paid ads, me and her, and we started there. And then, how it kind of segues into the HVAC world, which you nailed it, was Carrier Corporation is a major, manufacturer of heating and air conditioning units, of air conditioners and furnaces. Well, their headquarters is in Indianapolis, Indiana. It was like 15 minutes away from my office. And I just was really successful with air conditioning contractors. And here's why. Is the one thing I had learned from those Yellow Page days was the call tracking numbers. Because we were still using tracking numbers. And it was just making sure that I didn't rely on them to listen to the tracking numbers. I listened to them myself. So that way I could hear how is what I'm doing for them specifically actually working, like legit working, and how did they perform on the opportunity I brought them? So that way, when we have monthly conversations around performance, we weren't guessing. We're talking about the facts. And then you can attribute a number to it, right? If they spent 10 grand a month with me and I had 100 leads, well, I knew what my cost per lead was. And then if they sold it, we knew what the return on investment was, and they knew what they had their accountability in it, and I had mine.
Yeah. And
we just took our time building it. So I was literally building campaigns, selling it, doing the marketing, listening to all the phone calls, putting it in a spreadsheet. And then I'm telling you, that was a grind.
Yeah.
But it was setting the foundation for everything. So that's when I realized, and it wasn't a tactic, man. It was just that if I only did HVAC every single day, nobody will be better than me, because I'm early to the game. I'm only focused on it, doing no other industries. The occasional HVAC also offered plumbing and electrical, but not at the scale like it does today. So that's how I did. And then that playbook is scalable all the way across any other vertical in that space. So that's what I didn't learn until later on.
Yeah. And just to be clear, you learned it all yourself, like in terms of SEO, building websites, all that stuff. It was all on your own?
All on my own. My wife and I both just kind of dug in and did it,
Wow.
and just kept learning. And, it's the normal like grind you hear, the long nights, long days doing the grind. So we just took the time to learn it.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. I want to dive into that a little bit more of like, were there any particular nightmare stories in the first few years of getting the agency going? Maybe like there's some bad results, or I don't know, something fell through. I want to really dig in.
Yeah, man. Thanks for bringing that pain point back up. I love feeling that all over again. These are the lessons that you learn, right? And a lot of people listening right now too probably have experienced this with either their clients or themselves or whatever. I'm not sure exactly who all listens to the podcast, but I made the critical error of not charging enough for the effort and the work I was putting in. And my thought process was come in, as a low cost option to get the business just to start. And then I got afraid to raise my own costs, when really I probably could have charged 4 times the amount that I was charging. So I was doing a lot of work for very little margin. And it didn't make sense. And I did that for like a couple of years too, until I was finally like ready to increase prices.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's probably the biggest pain point I had out of the gate that I made. And then with every other business that I've invested in or I'm a part of today, like that is always the first thing I think about is let's charge what we're worth, not what we think people think we're worth. Like let's charge for the value that we have to offer.
And do you think that's a universal problem? Like, is that with agencies, home service companies? Is that everyone that's not charging enough?
I think that it's been a problem for a long time. I think it's getting significantly better because people are talking about it, like you and I are talking about it right now on a lot of different platforms. But there's still people who want to come in as a low cost option because that's where their mind's at. Like the easiest way to sell something is to be the cheapest option. That's not the answer.
Mhm. And also, just to be clear, you guys were doing all kinds of services, or was it kind of mixed or select on any particular one, or was it just digital marketing as a whole?
Yeah, I've never done traditional, so I've always done build the website builds, search engine optimization, pay per click, anything in the digital space is what we play in today. But those early days, it was just the paid ads, SEO, and website building, and then doing the call listening and reporting piece of it.
Okay, cool. And then talk to me about your first few hires. So once you started to get more clients, once you started to scale up a little bit, what did that look like?
Yeah, I mean, my wife loves to tell this story. Our first hire, she didn't even know, but our first hire was actually a salesperson. So I had met with him and I hired him without telling her. I didn't really realize you had to like fill out all those paperwork and do all this stuff because I didn't know. But I made my first hire because I wasn't able to continue to sell at the pace I was selling and build and get these things done because we would collect half payment up front for a website build and I didn't get the other half till I was done.
Mm,
So I was starting to outsell my like what I
yeah,
could actually execute on. So I was like, okay, I just need somebody who can do half as good as me. If they can do half as good as me, I can start executing on these things. So our very first hire was another salesperson, and then the next second hire was somebody to help with SEO. So those are my two hires. And really, I was just trying to get time back, to be able to do the things that I'm best at.
yeah. Okay, cool. And then fast forward to, I think this was a few years ago, you guys had a big merger. So you guys scaled up completely. I'm not sure how much exactly. I'd guess at least a few $1 million a year. Can you talk about that merger that you guys had? Kind of fast forward to recently. When was that? And
Yeah,
tell me all about it.
yeah. So just for the listeners too, I mean, we launched the business in 2008. Technically, in 2008. Really, we did it in 2007, but we didn't know how to didn't know we had to register a business name. Like literally, we learned the business by being in business. Um, but we did a merger, yeah. So I think let me take one more step back. We because when you work with big players, Danny, you start to learn different games, which is all part of our growth and being in business. You're around different people, you're around different circles, like Tommy, and you start to learn different levels of the game that you're playing that you didn't know before, like private
Mm,
equity.
hmm.
And when I first heard private equity, I didn't know what that meant, right? And I didn't even know, like, nowhere on my radar on how to use it. Well, once you get the business to a certain size, 20, $30 million, um, it's very difficult to say, I'm going to grow to 50 million. Like it was hard to get to 20. It was hard to get to my first million, then the 5 million in number, then the 10 million number, then getting from 10 to 20 million, like very difficult to get there. And then for me, I couldn't think, how do I take this thing from 30 to 50? Like, where am I going to get that? And so it was just the right time to make a responsible decision. And I had learned over time, especially with my partnership with Gary V, on what I need to be looking at and what my actual tools I can use to scale this thing. Well, at some point in time, you have to bring in people who are smarter than you to take on all these jobs, which we've done. And I thought there's people much smarter than me that know how to scale this thing that are that's a responsible decision for me and Anna, my wife, to make because we have an obligation to all these employees to help them continue to have new opportunities to grow, make more money, career advancement, that type of stuff. Well, the responsible decision was bring on somebody smarter than me to help us scale it. I could still do what I'm best at, but I need somebody to actually run the business.
Mm.
And so we brought on a private equity partner in 2023. Um, yeah, 2023. God, it's 2025 already.
Yeah, I know.
In 2023, and after 18 months, or excuse me, 14 months of researching and meeting with different opportunities. And the whole plan was to bring on a private equity partner to scale. So people think, oh, you sell the business and you're out. That is not, I mean, some people do that. That wasn't our play. Our play was bring on private equity who knows how to run the business side of it and then let us do our thing at this scale. And that was the responsible decision. But now that I've learned the game, it's like, oh, I can continue to scale. And now I know how to go and bring other smaller companies into our mix that makes it successful for them. It's also successful for us because they either offer something that we don't, or maybe they're better at something than we are, or maybe they're in a different vertical or industry that we're not in. So it's an easy add-on to the business, and I have the entire back end to do everything. I just need the entry into the vertical. So it's just, you learn the game, Danny. Like along the way, you kind of learn, well, how does that plug into it? Whereas when I first started this business, that was not even on my radar, like of buying a company.
Yeah.
So that's the game.
Okay. So is there a certain level a company should be at before they start looking at private equity? Like, should it be 5 million a year, or, where you were at 20 to 30?
Yeah, I think that, well, number one thing that matters, Danny, is like, why are you doing it? Because when you sell your business, when you take $1 for your business, like things change. And you have to do you want to now report to somebody? Like when you're an entrepreneur, you really got to think through if you want to report to someone. So number one is making sure, like, do you want to do that? And if the answer is, yeah, I don't mind doing that, which is what I said, was when I went to it, it was, I chose the private equity group with the CEO that I really respect. And that's somebody who I wouldn't mind learning from because I'm a constant student and I don't have an ego that says I have to be the one that runs it. I just want the smartest person to run this thing. And if I have to report to that person and can learn from them, I'm okay with it. So I had to make that decision just like anybody else who's won this other business has to make that decision. But if you decide you want to make it and you're thinking, what's my size? I just literally had the same conversation yesterday with a $4 million company who reached out to me and said, hey, I'm $4 million, I'm making $1 million, in EBITDA. And, what do you think I can get for this business? And so the things I always ask are, what's your churn rate? Because exactly what the people are going to want to know, are you like bringing in people and churning them? So what's your annual churn rate? Obviously what's your top line revenue? What's your EBITDA? And at the end of the day, if you have great leadership, like they don't want to just sell and go, or they want to sell and stay, there's some variables in there depending on the talent. But if you're running a $1 million EBITDA business in your digital marketing company right now, you get six times on that thing. Maybe there's obviously variables to that, Danny. But if making $6 million and saying, hey, cool, here, let me take some chips off the table and then go join a bigger company and then get another exit, in another few years is appealing to you, well then, yeah, man, get that thing prepped to sell. But if you're asking me my opinion, you have way more leverage when you get to $2 million of EBITDA. Way more leverage. You have way more options. You have better multiples. So, that's the game. And by the way, like for marketing companies right now, multiples were going great. Now the multiples are starting to come back down. So like the window's not closed. We have another year of decent multiples. But if somebody's considering it, like the time is this year. Like you want to get into that process, but you also want to make sure you got a good trailing 12 months of business.
Really? Why do you say that? Just because it's naturally been trending that way?
Yeah, you can see the trends because I see so many deals. So many deals from other marketing companies wanting to sell to ours. Today we're a $92 million organization, like we're a beast, and that includes 4 companies. So the merger that you were talking about was a company called Blue Corona, who I've competed against for years. I know the owner very well, very successful. They're the same age as us. They focused on the home services space. So it was it just made a lot of sense. And we were really, really good. Like we were really tight. They had great technology, great leadership. We had great technology, great leadership. And when you merge the two together, you become a force to be reckoned with. And because the marketing, the marketing world's getting more difficult, it just made sense to combine them. But because of that, we see people who are kind of waving the white flag saying, okay, cool, I got this thing to $1 million. I'm making $1 million a year. but this chat GPT and AI stuff starting to scare the crap out of me a little bit. Like maybe I start looking to partner with somebody and just take some chips off the table. And I think that's a pretty smart move right now.
So you guys have always been familiar with them, and then you guys just eventually started talking naturally, and you agreed on it? How did that happen?
So the same private equity group that acquired RYNO also acquired them.
Okay, so that's easy.
Yeah, so that was easier. And then they acquired 2 more companies after that. But now, like for me, because so many different people know who I am, and because I'm like you said, I'm like the OG in this space. People
Yeah.
reach out to me for advice all the time, and I always give them my honest advice. And so from that, I also see deal sizes that are being offered to them, so I can see what the multiples are doing, and it's been that way the last couple of years. So it was kind of at its peak, and now it's starting to like taper off, and so this will probably be the last year where they can get decent multiples. If you're $1 million, you can still pull off something decent. 2 million, you still got some good leverage. But the way that the market's changing, you think about how does private equity think about what we're doing, and they're like, what's going on with all this AI stuff, and that scares people. So at what risk do you want to give up, and what multiple? Because all they're thinking about is, if I can buy $1 million EBITDA company for a 6 times, can I now take and sell that for a 10 times? Like I need to be able to recoup my money and make some decent money, and is the juice worth the squeeze? Does that make sense?
Yeah. 100%.
So it comes down to risk.
Yeah, that's all it is. Okay, cool. Mm-hmm. I just want to ask you, because I actually had no idea of the scale of the company. I knew it was worth millions, but 200 million is insane. I just want to ask you, like, retrospectively, how does that feel from that agency that you built that was like a startup? It was you and your wife. It was nothing. You're like cold calling, chasing down clients, to now being like a massive empire. Like how does that feel, just looking back on that?
Yeah, Danny, it's not 200 million. It's 92.
I thought you said 200.
No, 92.
Oh, okay.
That's okay. On our way.
Still, 92 is, dude,
Yeah.
that's still insane. It's like the same thing.
It is a behemoth. Now, it's easier to say that number because you've now merged in 4 businesses, right? So but every single digital, and they're all digital marketing companies, but we're all growing, like significant organic growth. And the question you're asking is, man, going from 2 of you, or even 10 people, to now 300 plus, yeah, it's a different beast. The game changes, and the game has changed. Actually, the game changes even when you're over 100 people, because now firefighting, is a constant position. When you're a bigger company, you're certainly a target, right? And you have to, you've got benefits. You have, people, a lot of people. You have delegation. You have leadership. You have, management. You have different layers of leadership. So the game changes, and you're no longer the one. Like today, I literally just, my wife is still in this business too. She's incredible, much smarter than me. She runs all of home services. Like she runs all the operations. She's over all of it. I asked her, I said, hey, I have a question about this. Who do I go to? I didn't even know who to go to. And then she told me the person, and I didn't know the person. Yeah. And that's like, I feel bad about that, because the way I came up was like, no, we're very personal. We're very close. We have a great culture here, but it's just like, you can't know everybody like I did when we had 100 people. I knew the 100 people. 300, that's very difficult. So the business changes. And, I was talking to a good friend of mine, Chad Peterman, who also is my co-host on the To The Point Home Services podcast, because he's a $140 million company. And we talked about, man, remember when we wanted to grow our business to $100 million and be the CEO, and it becomes like the things that you think it's going to be is not what you think it's going to be. Like some of it is, but you completely underestimate the people side of it, and the management of the people side of it, and all the stuff that comes with it. And like, there's just a lot to it. So now you like have business growth and people growth. Like, so you got true. Yeah. It's quite the dance. And it's weird, man. I'm going to be honest with you. It is different. It took some adjusting to get used to it, and just be okay with the fact that I'm not going to know everybody or their roles.
What was that like, going from CEO to CMO?
Yeah. That's also a question I get quite a bit. What I like most about what I've done at RYNO is I'm a sales and marketing guy. So I've really always kind of been over sales and marketing. And then once we brought on the private equity partner, I gave that up, of being the CEO of the business. And I was okay with that, because it allowed me to kind of like when I made my first couple of hires, it gave me my time back to do the things I was best at. Well, this did the same thing, it was just important that I reported to somebody that I really respected.
Mm.
So, but it allowed me to kind of fall into what I like to do the most. So for me, it was good. Because if I could just focus on that every day, I'm like, sweet. If it's just marketing the business, like I got this. I can go and I know where to go, which events to go to, how to get on main stage, who to reach out to, how to build a podcast. I knew all the things. And that's the stuff I enjoyed doing. Today, my actual role has changed already again. So I went from being CEO to CMO. And now my we brought on a CRO, which is a chief revenue officer, which you have to have at a company of our size. It doesn't make sense to really have a CMO, so my role kind of shifted to a chief strategy officer, which kind of is the fancy way of saying I'm leading the company vision, but I'm also over marketing.
Okay.
So I'm still over marketing. Like, it's my main thing, but the overall strategy of what's next in this business falls on my shoulders.
Okay, awesome. I've got so many questions for you. I just find this so interesting. It's like that's basically what I want to do too. I definitely see you as a role model. Well, one thing I wanted to ask is, you have grown, well, obviously with help of others, but you've grown the agency to a massive scale, and you've also helped a lot of home service companies grow to a massive scale. What is the difference between growing the two? Is it basically the same, or there's some fundamental differences?
I think there's actually some fundamental similarities, but when you're, I think we have roughly 800, maybe 900 clients, contractors. A lot of the way our business goes is dictated by the way their business is going. Right. So, and because of us being so heavy into the, our customer base today, Danny, kind of looks like heating and air conditioning contractors is by far the largest volume, then plumbing, roofing, electrical, restoration. We have a handful of pest control customers, not a lot because it's not a vertical that we've pursued yet. It's that marketing is a little different when you got that lower number. We go for big returns. But it's a lot of it's dictated on how are they performing, and then half the battle still too, both on the contractor side and our side, is we're all dependent upon search volume, search volume, and making sure that Google actually is still, there's still enough volume coming in, and what algorithm changes are happening. And like, because at the end of the day, all the customer cares about is, are you bringing me new customers? Because that's the game that we're in. And as long as we're doing that, everything's great. But at scale, it's never that. It's never that. And we could be doing a great job, but there's a breakdown in communication between us and client, because you're relying on an account manager, and to have great communication. And so there's still a human being aspect of this whole thing that could make the day good or bad, but for me, once you kind of get to a certain level, you usually only hear things when there's a fire,
Yeah.
and there's always fires, once you get to a certain size. It's just, it's just part of the deal. But contractors have the same thing. They feel the same thing. Like, when they slow down, whose fault is it, Danny?
Theirs.
Our fault. Nah, it's our fault, man. When they slow down, it's marketing's fault.
Yeah.
When things get slow, it's marketing's fault. And so it's just like, no, like, search volume is down. Like, here's I brought you in 40 leads and you booked 2. Like, maybe you have a booking problem, and let's talk about that.
So how do you deal with those fires? And specifically as an agency owner dealing with clients, how do you deal with those fires of maybe there's a problem? How does that get escalated? How do you make sure you're communicating properly with the client?
Yeah, number one thing is I try to take the emotion out of the situation. I'm a big believer in do what's right, always, no matter what. I don't care if it costs me $50,000, because that's what I like. You do what's right. That's how you get longevity in this business. And that hurts. And I've been down that path. But at the end of the day, it's just remove the emotion. Let's just talk about the facts. So for instance, a fire comes up today. Like, we had one yesterday that I got last night. Ruined my night. Right, last night, because it's all I could think about. Even though it's in the grand scheme of things, it's not a huge deal, but to me, it still bugs me. So I said, okay, here's what I want by the morning. Get me over the last 3 months basically Q4's numbers of all lead volume, cost per lead, their booking rate, and their revenue. Like, let's look at the thing from start to finish and see what happened, because then it takes all the emotion away. And now I can figure out, is it them, is it us, or is it both of us? So then I can figure out, because we're using the tracking numbers, and human beings are listening to those phone calls, and now thankfully it's a mixture of AI and human beings, and they're classifying the lead, and then we're saying, now how did they perform around the lead? It tells me the story, and then I know I can have an intelligent conversation with them with no emotion and say, hey, I understand you think XYZ, but look at this. This is the reality. You're booking these brand new leads at a 28% when the rest of them are booking at 41%. Like, you're shooting yourself in the foot. You're booking half of what you could be booking based on what you've already got coming in without spending a dollar. So let's look internally. It's not a marketing problem. It's a booking problem. But that's what I'm saying. Like, I can remove it. And maybe it is a marketing problem. And if it's a marketing problem, well, then that's a different conversation. Now it's, hey, we go to the paid team, you go to the local service ads team, you go to the social teams, and you say, hey, what's up? Why is the cost per lead so high? Let's start to analyze the data. So it's just get to the facts and always do what's right at the end of the day. And just because, people will say, hey, the customer's always right. That is not true. Customer is not always right. And it's not even their own fault. They just don't know. Like, they don't know. And so it's our responsibility to educate them, because if I just said, yeah, you're right, well, I'm not doing them any favors by not telling them they have an internal problem that they didn't know about. That's what makes you being a good partner is. You accept responsibility when it's your fault, and you coach when you know it's their fault, but you use the facts to back it up.
Yeah, awesome. And I like the word that you use, partner. I've heard that term specifically by a lot of the top agency owners that I've talked to. Can you explain kind of the difference between just being like a standard templated agency versus actually being a partner and being more involved?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people use it. It's a psychological move, right? It's just, you say I'm a partner versus a vendor, and
That's true. That's true.
And that's there's a sales tactic to it. But the way we've treated it is, we do way more than just a vendor does. Like, we are a full on a partner. Like, I'm involved in the operations of their business. So the days of just being a lead generation company are, in my opinion, are over for the elite ones, the elite companies. You got to chase it all the way through, and that makes you a partner. Like, that's what we are, and that's what we've been since the beginning. Because we didn't just think about this way back in the day. No marketing companies were listening to their own phone calls and then reporting it back, because if you sucked that month, like, there is no question that you sucked. It's crystal clear.
Yeah.
So it was just a risky move, but we bet on ourselves. But today, that's like, you have to do these things. And thankfully AI is helpful in this instance. And AI is not perfect, but it's getting closer. And so that's what I think makes you a partner. You can't just say partner for the sake of using that word, for a sales tactic. Like, you legit need to be a part of that business. And if you are a part of that business and you're proactive versus reactive, these guys feel that. These customers feel that, and that makes them stick around and gives you less churn.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Because that's something that I've been considering lately, and that was a big affirmation for me. So thank you for that. So something else I definitely want to cover is the 3-year partnership that you had with Gary Vee, which is just like insane. And this was not even related to this because you just brought it up on this podcast. But I looked up on ChatGPT who the top digital marketers are. Gary Vee is number 1. So you had a partnership with Gary Vee for 3 years, the number 1 digital marketer. So can you tell me like kind of how that went down?
Sure, yeah. And if you chat GPT, who's the top HVAC digital marketing company, it'll say RYNO.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Gary, and I knew, I just followed Gary's content. Like, when I just started listening to podcasts, his was the first, and that was back in 2016, 2017, and he was starting to do like some events here and there. So I went and watched him at one event. Well, one thing here's how our paths crossed, which will help. But one, his content was good then. So, he's like, and he was, the way I looked at Gary was, he's got the social media game figured out. And when I say social media, I'm including YouTube also, because he had the wine library channel he did for his dad's wine company. It was super successful. And he just seemed like to really understand the social platforms. And so I was always listening because I'm a student of the game. Like, I'm always trying to learn. Like, I never think I've got it all figured out. So I'm also, okay with taking shortcuts. If somebody else knows that I trust, why would I not take
Mm-hmm.
theirs and just and use those? And so he was one whose tactics I used. So he was like the first like business guru. Like I never followed the Tony Robbins. Like I knew who they were, but like I didn't go to their. That wasn't appealing to me to do
Mm-hmm.
those things. He was. So one thing that is really important to us all these years is giving back as one of our core values, and we've done it. I mean, every month, one Friday every single month to this day, with all these people, we still have 4 hours a day on a Friday once a month where they go and do community service.
That's awesome.
Big core value of ours. So one thing that's important to my wife and I was that, and we implement that into the business. And so that also kind of got us into this weird relationship with the then Arizona Cardinals football coach, which is Bruce Arians. And we got involved with his foundation. I'm not even sure how we got involved with this foundation. Somebody invited us to it. We went. I met him, and I was like, "Hey, we were building apps at the time, for phones. So I built an app for his foundation, and we just donated it to him. And that kind of started a relationship with he and I. And then it was, we kind of got in that athlete circle because once you get in and you have some trust, like people refer you to one another.
Mm-hmm.
And then Gary was just starting to get Vayner Sports going with him and AJ, him and his brother, and they were coming out to meet with one of the Cardinals players. And he also was doing like a dinner, putting together a dinner. And so I was like reaching out for months trying to get in contact with him. And when I heard he was coming out, I was like, this is my opportunity because I heard him talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was able to get into this dinner with him, and I'm talking to him and I was like, hey man, like I hear you're trying to get this. I think they called it Vayner Mentors back in the day, before they were just getting it off the ground. And they were trying to work with other like companies to say, hey, let us use, because they're, Fortune 500 was kind of their niche at the time, but they were doing nothing with SMBs. And that's what everybody's reaching out saying, hey, why can't you put together something for small businesses? So this was their attempt. And I said, hey, why don't you leverage me? Because you're not working with agencies. Why don't you use me as an agency as your guinea pig? Learn from how to make this program work, and then I'll leverage you to pull you into the home services space so they can hear what you're talking, like they can hear you, listen to you, and get to know you. Let's do this. We did a handshake deal that night. I still have the video. I have the video from that night where he took my phone and recorded it. And I shared it with my team on Monday, the next day. And we put together a handshake deal. 2 months later, we had the contracts laid out, and we decided to do a 3-year deal together. And it was fantastic. And today I'm, still great friends with Gary. And but I learned a lot from him, and it wasn't just on how to go after social. It was after how to go after voice search, because the voice search game was kind of coming up. So we learned those tactics from him. We learned the operational side of the business, like if we're going to get to 40 million, what the scale need to look like, what the bodies need to look like. He's the one that talked me into launching the podcast. That's why I did it in the first place. And then he helped it, and that's why he came on. He's been on multiple times. I went on his, and so it was great, man. Like, cause I was like a sponge soaking up everything from him. And at the end of the day, and when it was over, it didn't make sense for them to buy the business, and at least not to us, because we thought we could do more. And we just parted ways, and we've been friends. Like, so that's how it worked. It was just one of those deals where I just made it happen. Kind of, you see that I made it happen with wrestling. Same thing, man. Like, you can be on a team, but you got to put in the work to go make it happen. Bull riding, you go and study the bulls to make it happen. And racing, you study the data to make it happen. Like, I was never afraid to do the work to win.
That's so awesome. Yeah, I mean, you basically just answered it, but I wanted to ask you, like, what would you accredit that to? Is it like right place, right time? Is it positioning? Is that you were already kind of a big figure in the space? Because I'm sure, like, anyone would love to partner with Gary Vee. He's such a big figure in the space. So, like, what exactly did you do? What would you mainly accredit that to?
It's two things, man. A piece of advice that my wrestling coach gave me back in the day, which is like still to this day one of my biggest mentors. Even though I don't talk to him, he knows he was really influential in my life and setting the tone for my discipline and the hard work. And it was also that, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. So it was the one piece that helped me get that is I was ready. I was prepared when the opportunity came up, but I had to scratch, call, phone calls, emails. I'm doing all the work to try and connect with him. And for months. So when the opportunity came up that he was coming to Phoenix, and he had a connection to someone I knew, I just got on the phone and started figuring out how can I get myself in that room and tell him what I need to tell him. So I was prepared when I got the opportunity, but I was putting in the work too, man. Like I grinded it out to make that happen.
Wow. Yeah, that's so awesome, man. That's such a cool story too. So I want to be respectful of your time. I know you've got a podcast after this. So last question I've got for you is, what is one of the biggest lessons you've learned in the past few years?
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson is, to be vulnerable. It's okay if you don't know something, and it's okay if someone does something better than you. Pride is the enemy. Can be your enemy, and it can lead to destruction if you have it. Like if you can let it go, you'll move so much further faster. Anyone who needs to be right for the sake of being right is the wrong person.
Mm.
And I don't, and I had that. Like when you're building a business and you feel like you're responsible, you have to be the one. Well, today, that's why you heard me say a couple times, I'm a student of the game. Is
Mm-hmm.
I don't know everything. There's no way I could know everything in this business, and I need to allow people who are smarter than me to do the things that they're better at. And today, it's like not even. I'm just like, I got to keep getting better. I have to keep getting better, and I got to be vulnerable. And now it doesn't mean that you aren't a bulldog.
Yeah.
I'm very much a bulldog. I'm very much driven, which is why Tommy and I are so tight, because he and I are very much alike. But we're also okay with being wrong, and we're also okay with not having the answer. And that vulnerability is an absolute strength.
Awesome, man. So good. I love all of it. I think everything you said here was amazing. I think you're really, like I said, a role model, a great figure in the space. And I'm so glad to have you on the show.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you having me, Danny. And my hope for doing things like this is, I come from nothing. Nobody gave me anything. I bootstrapped this thing together. I don't need accolades. I appreciate you saying those nice things to me, but what you're looking at is years of incredibly hard, difficult work and a long journey of ups and downs and having money and not having and being incredibly poor and like making bad decisions and good decisions. Like it's just the journey, and the journey is the battle that you're in. It's also the memories that you're making. And most people aren't being handed this $92 million business. Like it was a brutal journey, right?
Yeah.
I was just willing to take the ride and work through it.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. I really respect that so much. Last thing, where can people find you? Where can they learn more about you? Social media, website, all of that stuff.
Yeah, man, I pretty much live my life on the record. I think you know that. So I'm pretty easy to get in touch with. The podcast is one way, To the Point Home Services podcast, but I'm on social media. I'm on pretty much every platform that you can think of. So I'm not difficult to get in touch with. But and then the name of the company is RYNO, RYNO. But really, you can just look me up personally, social, whether it's on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, you'll see it. Like I said, I'm pretty easy to get in touch with if someone needs me.
Cool. All right, awesome. All of those links will be in the description. And anything else you'd like to plug or mention?
No, man, just keep doing your thing. Like stuff like this matters. And I know sometimes, when you're I know how hard this is to do. I know how preparation is difficult on this, but all it takes is impacting one person differently. And and changing the trajectory of what they're doing in their life, that makes it all worth it, right? So keep doing what you're doing, man. Like I think this is a platform that you've been given to serve, so keep going.
Definitely, I appreciate that, man. Well, thank you again for coming on, Chris. It's been a pleasure, and I hope to have you on again.
Thanks, Danny.
Yeah, for sure. All right, bye, Chris.